Sure. Thanks. Appreciate it, Dustin. And thanks, Andrew, again for inviting me to talk tonight. Hopefully I can bring some value, answer some questions. I'll try and reserve quite a bit of time if it turns into an ask me anything and everything. That's cool with me. Happy to see if we can answer some questions. Let me share my screen and we can kind of jump in. I'll do a quick intro and yeah, we'll take it from there. Can you guys see my screen? All right, cool. So I'm gonna talk a little bit tonight about what my recommendation is, and I always sort of couch this and give the caveat that my experience is going to be different than anybody else's experience. It's informed by my personal journey, and so the advice that I'm giving is take it for what it's worth. I'll give you a little bit of my background so you can kind of then take it with that value and assume that it's from that lens. Um, so the data engineering kind of put first before data science because I optimistically think that for newer folks, there are going to be more opportunities in data engineering. And if your eventual goal is to get into data science or that's what you've trained for, the data engineering part should come pretty straightforward and that hopefully will lead to your ultimate goal. So before I jump any deeper into that, I can talk a little bit about who I am. Again, he mentioned I've been in the community, largely in the JavaScript community for a really long time. Been writing software since I was a kid, so about 32 years. But the last 5 or 6 years, I've been in the space of either immersive coding boot camps or now an apprenticeship program, and really helping people transition from something usually outside of tech into a first tech opportunity. And so I'm interfacing with lots and lots of employers and have a pretty good sense of what employers are looking for both software engineering roles and data engineering roles. So like I said, hopefully I'm approaching it with that lens and that'll add, some value. So the first thing I'll suggest is when thinking about the job search, when thinking about landing your first opportunity, you really should go into it knowing what you want to go after and not be desperate. So that's like pro tip number one is don't articulate and like make it clear I'll take anything, like I'm open to just any entry level, paid, unpaid. It's not a good look, and most hiring managers really want to know like, hey, this is a place where you're going to be here for a while and it actually aligns with what your goals are. And that makes it easier to make a decision to invest in you. So try and be clear about what it is you want to accomplish over the next, let's say, 5 years. Come up with a plan. This is where I want to start. This is where I'm prepared to kind of start at wage wise. This is where I'd like to kind of fit environment wise. Big companies, small, scrappy startup, kind of come up with that ideal persona of an organization and then pick top 10 companies. If right now, if you're looking for a job and you really can't clearly articulate what the top 10 companies are that you'd like to apply for, these are like your dream opportunities, then I would really consider pausing before you do any other job search activities until you really identify that. What is it that would make just like success, right? If you get into these 10 companies, because they're always going to stay on your list no matter what. Those companies are always going to be shooting for, but it'll help you shape where else you're going to be looking. So main thing I want to kind of get you into the mentality of if this is your first opportunity is even though there's a lot of pressure typically to find a job and get going somewhere, try and plan for beyond just like taking the first opportunity that arises, right? And instead really have a focus on what's going to be a good fit because that will translate in the process, in the interview. That will come across very clearly, even if you're trying to like hold it back. And then finally, one of the first steps that I would identify at the beginning of this process is finding not just one, but finding multiple mentors, people that are more seasoned, people that have been in the space that can begin to help you build a network and connect you with individuals that may help you along this journey. It's going to be super critical for actually like making the connections that you need. And so when we talk about networking, I think the easiest way is not to talk about like the informal, like informational interviews and that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not a huge fan of that. I'm more of a fan of just making real connections at meetups like this, right? Engaging with people in the community and then asking people, hey, would you mind? You've got some experience. Would you mind if I asked you a question every once in a while? Or could you give me some feedback and some advice? Start building out that network of people that you can count on for good advice. So the next thing is, what do they want? I think a lot of people don't really consider what the person on the other side of the table is looking for. So he or she, that's the hiring manager persona, is typically looking for very non-technical skills. They will want some base level, like requisite knowledge of X, Y, and Z, right? So if you go into it, you're looking for a data engineering position and they say, how much do you know about ETL? And you're like, what's an ETL? And be like, all right, that's not enough. You're not at that bar yet. You got to have at least enough common knowledge of the language, common knowledge of what the predominant and prevailing stacks and applications are. Be familiar enough with that that you can kind of navigate your way through conversation and be able to have sort of a pretty good base knowledge of the mechanics. So I don't want to spend too much time on that because I think everybody has a pretty good sense of like, these are the core technologies that you're going to kind of need to know. You're going to need to know SQL. You're going to need to know how to wire up ETLs. You're going to need to know how to create data pipelines. All of those things will just be like foundational. But it's way more important when they're interviewing you or they're giving you like a take home task or they're asking you to solve a challenge in the office. When they give you some data, I had 50 conversations in this last 2 month stretch of time with hiring managers in data engineering. And they across the board were saying things like, I want to see what their first pass of analysis is when they look at the data. Do they pay attention to the fact I've intentionally put some dirty data in? And are they picking up on that right away? Like, how do they make that first pass and try and get the data a little bit cleaner? Then how do they focus in and get it even cleaner so that they can actually then start using the data? And then what observations do they communicate right away? Are they able to say, dig deeper and ask really curious questions about the data set and really try and understand what are the problems that you're trying to solve by looking at the data? And it was interesting that that was a big portion of what they were saying was lacking in some of the folks that were applying for roles or going through the interview process, is that they were treating it more of like a process instead of really trying to understand the business needs and like, what is the data telling them? What are the signals that you're looking for, et cetera. So try and focus a lot more on the big picture, on communicating clearly things like, I really want to understand what the problem is and what are sort of the constraints, et cetera, and less about like the perfect response, the perfect answer, perfect technical implementation. Much better to just give them a much better sense of what your grit, what your determination is, what your current skill set is, if that makes sense.
Hey, Michael, by the way, somebody wanted to point out that your screen share is partially covered up by Evernote.
Ah, let's get this out of the way.
I don't think we're losing any content, but wanted to.
All right. Yeah, I don't think so either. I think you're good. Maybe some
There we go.
terrible memes, but be all right. So before you then start the job search. So what I say is like starting a new job, because I think of the job search like a job. And if you treat the job search like a job with the same kind of discipline and diligence, the process is going to go way faster and it'll be way easier. If you don't treat it with like the discipline of treating it like a job and having a real structure and a process to it, then it's just going to take longer and it's just going to be more painful. So I talk to people all the time that are super frustrated and they tell me like really common mistakes they're making. And I'm like, okay, if you just stop doing that, the process will be way easier. Like you're working way harder than you need to. So think about it like a job. And if it was a job, then you want to make sure that you have your basic tools to go to work every day. And so to go to work when you're searching for a job, you got to have your kit. You got to have your resumes in good shape, GitHub's in good shape, a portfolio, and then your email signature ready to go so you can respond to people. And you have your contact number and your email. So people aren't just like, how do I call you, fool? Like you just sent me an email. I don't have your phone number, right? So those kinds of things, setting them up from the very beginning are going to make it way easier. Pro tip, second pro tip of the night, always use a burner phone number. Senior engineers, you can tell me why. On your resume, like use a Google Voice number, not your real cell phone number, because you're gonna get an insane number of people calling you after you land a job, and it's just kind of annoying that you get a constant like cold calls from recruiters. So I suggest get a Google Voice number, have that forward to your phone. The recruiters aren't going to know the difference. While you're searching, you'll get the calls. And as soon as you're done searching, you just turn off the Google Voice and then you don't get any of those recruiter calls for like the next couple of years until you're ready to start your job search again. So trying not to make it sort of like a nuisance when you actually get a job, people are going to keep calling you. So resume, again, I'm not going to turn this into a resume workshop. I just think for beginners, for entry level folks, the most important tip that I can give you overarching about your resume is strongest things about your experience and rationale why they should hire you to weakest. So put your strongest attributes towards the top and then descending order. And then the second thing is just don't sweat it needing to be perfect. It just can't have flaws and defects. So it can just be okay, because as a beginner, you're not going to have a lot of experience that's job relevant to data engineering. You'll have some passion projects. Maybe you've got a certificate or some school, maybe you graduated, all that stuff. Great. That's up at the top. That's very relevant. But there's not enough for you to have like 3 pages of projects and frameworks and libraries. If that were the case, this probably isn't your first job in data science, right? This isn't your first job in data engineering. So that said, what I typically think of is you just want them to look at the resume and nothing stands out as like not formatted correctly, out of order, big gaps, in a weird order to itself. If all that's good, be like, all right, cool. This looks like what I would expect, someone that just graduated. Awesome. Let's get them on the phone. Let's have a conversation and see where it goes. That's what you want. You just want to like check the box. It's hardly ever going to be like, oh man, I got to talk to this person now. Like this, hey, has all the matching experience. It's just not likely. So you don't have to worry about striving for that. Just be authentic. Here's the most relevant experience. Here's what you were doing before. You don't have to be shy about the fact that you're transitioning into a new field. Here's how that might be applicable. You might have some transferable skills that will apply, and then move on. GitHub, you want to make sure it's clean, that you're showing some consistent commits. Sometimes when folks are like, well, if I'm doing data engineering projects, how do I demonstrate that on my GitHub? Well, you've got Jupyter notebooks. You could be committing that, committing some source code. You could be committing infrastructure as code. So you could be using Ansible to implement a project and show how you set up an ETL pipeline. So try as much as you can to be able to have a demonstration of what your skill set is that's available for people to access at the time where they pick up your resume or the time they check out your LinkedIn. So the more you can put out there in front of them in your portfolio or in your GitHub, the easier the decision is to like, let's just set up a phone call and see where it goes from there. That's what you want to get to. You want to get to a phone screening as fast as you can. And then finally, just again, make sure you put your contact information on your email. It makes it super easy for them when they're desperately trying to set up phone screenings and they got a hole. You want to be the person they can easily contact, get on the phone and get a phone screen done, right? So that could be the game changer. They're not going to have to hunt down, where do we put this person's resume? They're like, there's the email. I want to talk to this person. Here's the phone number. Next up, time management. As an early career developer, this is where I see the most like pain in folks, because they're just not clear what they should do. And they spend a lot of their time like going to Indeed every day and clicking the one-click apply and thinking they're making progress. And when I ask them, like, what's your process? They're like, I've applied to like hundreds of jobs. Yeah, and there's your problem. So rather than spending the majority of your time applying for jobs, I'd say roughly spend 20% of your time learning new things. So just a portion of your time should be constantly learning, because you want to be able to demonstrate how quickly you can pick up new tasks, grow, learn. You're going to adapt and like thrive in the new environment that you're put into. Spend 20% of it doing reach outs, 20% following up. So that's like 60% of your time. More than half of your time is researching companies, reaching out to them, following up with them, learning new things. And then the rest of your time working on passion projects, right? So passion projects. People, the first question people used to ask me is like, what's a good example of a passion project? And my first answer is like, I don't know. I don't know what your passions are. I don't know you. So, but everybody has something that you're interested in. And if you're not, then maybe you have an interesting problem that you've read about in the blog. And if that's not the case, maybe you've got some interesting data that you found and you want to figure out and make some sense out of it. Or maybe you need to present something about some data. So just figure it out. So I'll give you one that's, I'm going to carefully delve into politics and I'm going to back right out. But the maps, I found a super interesting visualization of maps where you usually see like states painted red and blue in counties. And instead visualizing it as dots and bigger or smaller dots makes a completely different like view of the map, right? And so again, seeing something like that, that could be an interesting way to, get a hold of some data and try and visualize something around COVID, right? So sky's the limit. But the key is you should be spending roughly 60% of every day hands on the keyboard, designing solutions, putting things into your portfolio, not working on the portfolio side itself, but working on content that you can then go in and have a conversation, because it makes the interviews way easier if you bring something to the table that you can take the focus off of you and you can nerd out with the person that you're talking to about a project that you did and like the visualization that you created or how you set up this automation in this data pipeline, right? So think about that. Can you demonstrate how you orchestrate an ETL? Can you demonstrate infrastructure as code? And then from that, we move into process. So this is the process. It's not this, right? It's not, I apply for a job and then I'm going to get an interview and I'm going to get a job offer. Go into it knowing that it's going to be researching the company. You're going to look at those top 10. You're going to figure out, okay, this is what they do. Very next thing you're going to do is connect with someone inside the organization. You're going to find what I call internal champions. So an internal champion is someone that works inside of the company on a team. Hopefully that's a team that you'd work for. Perfect person is like a team lead or an engineering manager, right? Someone on the data engineering team. And then once you've created that connection with that individual, that's the time where you apply. And then you tell the person, oh, by the way, Dustin, it's great getting to know you and a little bit about what your company does. I saw that you guys posted this job. I actually applied for it. What do you think? Do you think I got a chance? And then Dustin's going to probably say something like, yo, we have a employee referral program. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that you get an interview, because if they hire you, then I get a little bonus, right? So there will be people that will be naturally incentivized to just help you because you ask them for mentorship, and they're going to want to do that because they're cool people. And they're like, yeah, sure. You got a question, more than happy to mentor you. But that internal champion is going to be the difference for a lot of beginners and early career folks between your resume just ending up in the trash can and you at least getting. In most cases, what ends up happening is the people that do internal referrals. So this is kind of like inside the ballpark. So inside of a company, if there is an internal referral program, it's kind of like an unspoken rule that if you refer someone, they get a first interview, they get a phone screening, right? Because otherwise it just irritates people that like, hey, I referred someone and you didn't even like do a phone screening for them. Like, what's the deal? Like, what's going on here? So you get a pretty good shot if you can get someone inside to at least say, hey, if this person reaches out, that's my referral. I know that person. And that like immediately bumps you up to being much more close to at least getting a phone screening. And again, that's all you need. You need an opportunity to talk about how you're hungry, you've learned X, Y, and Z, you're super passionate about it. Here's the kinds of projects that you work on. You'd really love to work in an organization. And then you've done your research. So you can say, I love the fact that you folks work in this space and you do X, Y, and Z. And I'm super familiar with the technology stack. And there's just like, this person's polished. All right, we can bring them in. This is not a waste of time, right? So then you're going to basically do, after you've done that, applying for the job, then you're going to do the follow-ups, right? You're going to consistently follow up. You drop the application, you follow up in a week. If you don't get a hold of somebody, you follow up in a couple business days. Keep following up. I know it seems like you're going to annoy the heck out of people, but understand that when they get annoyed, they're just going to tell you, sorry, you're done. And then what you do is just kick it out for a month, because you can still come back a month later and be like, hey, I noticed the job posting's still up. And in the month's time, since you said that you were going to kind of take a pass, I've learned X, Y, and Z. And you could still say, this is what I've done for the last month. This is what I've done for the last 2 months. Clearly, they're still looking if the job posting is still up. It's still, still there. But in the event that you get a hold of somebody, you shouldn't feel like they're super busy. They're probably understaffed because they're hiring for somebody. So don't feel like they're avoiding you. It's typically not that they're avoiding you. It's typically like they either can't contact you yet because they haven't lined up the right internal people and set up the interview date and know when it's available. So don't take it like it's a personal thing, like they don't like you. Just keep following up. Just stay top of mind, and that's gonna be super helpful. Rinse and repeat that process for a while, and eventually get the phone screen and then the interview. The way the numbers shake out for most people that I see is you actually only need a couple interviews. Usually the first interview is terrible, so sorry to jinx it, but usually the first one is like super hard. And then you kind of learn very quickly from that. And the second or third interview is usually the one where the deal's done, right? You get in another opportunity with another company, it goes well, it's a good match, and you get an offer. Or the third one, if you do more than 3 interviews at 3 separate organizations, then just like reach out to somebody like me or another mentor and just ask them to give you a mock interview and help you identify what's going wrong during the interview. Because it shouldn't take that many interviews. Usually, like by the time they bring you in for an interview, that's another huge pro tip number 3. By the time they pull you in for an interview, they want to hire you. They're on your side at that point because they're bringing engineering resources together off of the floor doing production work to talk to you. And so they're more interested in hiring you than not hiring you, right? It's not to say that like you've got the job when you walk in the door, but it's like it's actually skewed in your favor because they're taking time out of their day to have a conversation with you. And so think about it from that perspective, that like they want to hire you, but you can't use your foot gun or put your shoe in your mouth. You've got to actually demonstrate you're the right fit for the role, right? So the number of applications per week, this is a key indicator. So usually what I'll ask people to do is like use a spreadsheet when you're doing your reach outs and you're trying to find out like, okay, where I'm going to apply to this week, who do I need to follow up with, who do I need to talk to, who do I need to find a company to connect to. So use a spreadsheet so you can keep track of all those things. And then don't put on there the one clicks on Indeed where you just open the page and you just like click, 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 apply, 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 apply. Those don't count. Those don't count. Instead, research 10 companies, reach out, connect with 10 people, apply for 10 jobs. If you just do that, that will tee up enough opportunities. That combined with the follow-ups that you're going to do is not going to leave you enough time to do more than like those 10 and do your passion projects and work on those. So, and when I see somebody has a spreadsheet that has like 100 on it, I'm just like, yo, you're not following up with any of these. If you just followed up with these ones here, you wouldn't have to reach out to new ones because these ones right here are where the job's at. Like you're just blowing through this and shotgunning it. So 10 is a pretty reasonable number. If you're doing way over 10, you're probably working harder than you need to. That's it. It's just that straightforward. So I'll open it up. Any questions?
Definitely feel free to unmute and ask your questions. If you throw them in chat, Andrew, I will read them out and make sure they get answered.
Yeah, I'm a little bit late, but did you talk about some of the ways that people can network?
Yeah. So
Again,
my favorite
networking is such a huge part of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So my favorite too. So my favorite social media of all time, I think it's the awesome sauce, is LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn literally makes you have the capacity to talk to like anybody. That's not likely they're gonna like, I'm still waiting for Oprah to accept. I'm still waiting for Obama to accept, right? But I've literally had lunch with like Gary Ridge. He's like the CEO of WD-40 because I just reached out to him. Like, hey, Gary, that's amazing. I didn't know WD-40 is in San Diego. Any chance I can go to lunch with you one day? And he's like, sure. I'll have my secretary put it on the calendar. And next thing you know, I'm like sitting across the table from Gary Ridge and he's talking about WD-40 and company culture and values and stuff. So it's a great equalizer because like you're literally just like one person clicking away from you being able to talk to like Elon Musk or whoever you want to talk to, right? So leverage the heck out of that, right? Use that as a primary source to research and find people inside organizations that you can try and connect with. And again, don't be super like spammy. Just reach out and say, hey, I see what your company is doing. Love to connect with you. I'm looking for some mentors. I don't know if you've got some bandwidth to help somebody out that's just getting started. The other one that I really like beyond the LinkedIn is what you're doing right now, meetups. Super organic, super easy way to just like come out, introduce yourself. When there's an opportunity, like I know Andrew and Dustin asked me to give a talk. If there's an opportunity to give lightning talks at meetups, give a 5-minute lightning talk. Like that's a super great way to demonstrate like you just worked on this passion project. Then you get to be the expert in the room for 5-10 minutes. Awesome opportunity to again, network. Old school.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks.
So one thing I'd like to say, I don't know if you agree, Michael, that the one thing that if you do reach out on LinkedIn, please include a couple of sentences about why you're reaching out. Because, you know, for some people, like you get, you know, random people, you know, sending LinkedIn requests and you're like, why is this person like reaching out to me? And just like 1 or 2 sentences is like, hey, you know, I see you work at, company A. I'm really curious about learning about more about it. Would you be able to, give me 15 minutes or 5 minutes just to tell me about your company? Just so it kind of gives them an idea, because you don't know whether are they recruiters trying to use you to spam other people? Are they a salesperson? Are they, kind of deal. So definitely, I usually include some, couple sentences about why I'm reaching out.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and again, just try and be respectful of the person's time. I try and ask like closed-ended questions. You notice how Andrew phrased it? Do you have time for a 15-minute call to talk about your company? That's easy, because in my phone, I can just be like, yes, here's my email, right? But if you ask the person like, hey, what are the biggest challenges you're facing in 2021? Like, yo, ain't nobody got time for that noise in LinkedIn. Right? Like, I wish I could, but like by the time I like can pause and answer that question, like I've moved on to something else. It's like super hard to make that happen. But if you can ask a very short, closed-ended question like, do you have 15 minutes? Here's my email. Like, that conversation can get started like super easily. Make it super clear. Like, hey, don't want to be a huge pest. This is what I'm looking for. This is where you're at. Like, just make it super authentic, and people will be helpful. Like, engineers really, senior engineers, folks really love to mentor. So what else? Any other questions? That was a good one. I'm impressed.
Yeah, just to reiterate how small of a world it is, I just moved out of an office next to that WD-40 building. The WD-40's
Nice. Up in
headquarters is Scripps
Carroll
Ranch.
Canyon.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. I was right next door at the Rhino Linings building. They make the truck liners, bed liners.
Yeah, we always have questions on this topic. I'm sure there's more out there. Who's got a question?
I had a question.
Sure. Shoot.
First off, I just want to say, thanks, Mike. I've been following your Twitch stream and LinkedIn stream. And I
Nice.
asked a question a few weeks ago, and I was able to apply your tips, and it really felt like motivational, and also I think it kind of helped a lot. I was able to get to a third round interview, and so I got through the technical assessment, the phone screening, and I'm looking at a interview slated for 30 to 45 minutes with the VP of engineering. I was wondering at that stage if you just had any quick tips or anything. And thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest is to try and just spend some time if you can, if it's possible. You said, is it Thursday you said?
I'm not sure yet, but it could be as soon as Thursday or tomorrow. Who knows?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's possible, if you already know some of the technology stack that they work in,
Mm-hmm.
build a little passion project, work on something that uses their technology stack. Because that way, if it's done in time, you could actually bring it in there, and that 45 minutes could turn into you just walking them through their tech stack,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you just nerding out with them on that tech stack. Now, this may not work if you go and look up their tech stack and they're like, we use all these technologies you've never used before. It's going to be kind of hard. You're not going to be able to make up that turf in that short of a period of time. So then I would just stay fresh and just focus on the basics, focus on mechanics, things that you know are going to be tried and true. They're never going to like change or go away, like SQL queries, right? And just try and stay relaxed and stay, active between now and then. Right. But that would be like, people ask me like the day before sometimes, what can I do? It's like day before it's too late. But if you got a week, then that passion project using their technology is the easiest way for you to basically, it's kind of like a rope-a-dope, right? So you can turn that interview experience more into a conversation about what your skill sets are by showing what you've actually done.
Great.
And
Thank
if
you.
I would throw in as a plan B, at least like try and if they've got like 10 things listed, at least try and like get yourself a definition in your notes of what that thing actually is, so that you don't BS them, but like you can go, oh, I've not used it, but I've used this thing that's similar, or I looked it up and it sounds really interesting. I'd love to work on it. And they go, oh, okay, this person's not just showing up hoping for a job. They actually are trying already before we offered them anything.
Great. Thank you.
Do I have any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm learning lots of stuff, but I'm trying to also use main skills like Hadoop and other things in the capstone project to avoid including them like a Udemy course and adding as a skill. So what should be the balance between learning new stuff? Which one should I place in my resume, like real hands-on, very maybe difficult task on capstone projects, or there are some mini projects and they are not very hard, but like I am using Docker, for example. Should I include in resume too? What should be the
Okay,
optimum?
so this may be controversial, but I'm going to give you my take, right? Keep it real. So my take is this: when I look at passion projects, I like short and sweet. I like thinking about it in the size and scale of something that you can get done in 2 to 3 days max. Whenever you bite off more than that as a software engineer, especially as a beginner, sometimes it can reveal more of like the edge cases that you didn't have time to cover, and you didn't have time to do this, and you didn't have time to do that, and this part's undone, but I'm working on this part next. There's a lot of that going on versus if the project was smaller in size, scope, and scale, you could actually spend more time setting up continuous pipeline and really refining all of those steps to show that like on the surface and you've gone deep in one little area, right? But you got like the whole thing sort of set up. So I would lean more towards those smaller micro projects, but really try and combine them. So you're taking like 3 or 4 days to build something that's of significant enough size that it shows. It's not just, like you said, a little Udemy course where it's just a ride along and you're just doing something that you saw a video on, but you really are putting together the pieces. And if you kind of get into a rhythm of like, well, all the projects that I do, I always put them on GitHub. I always automate them. I always push the data to Netlify. I always do X, Y, and Z. That process will be super like routine for you, but they don't know that. They're gonna look at your project and be like, oh man, you set up tests, you get coverage, you get the GitHub actions. Awesome. Like, that's great. So that's the angle that I would take. And it's the one big versus a bunch of small. I would go a bunch of small every day of the week.
Yeah, I would add there's a couple of just foundational skills that are kind of apply across everything, which is methods of authentication, encryption certificates, stuff that's kind of general, but you at least in your interview, you speak the language, some of these foundational things. I think that goes a long way as well.
Yeah. It's that reps, right? You're getting more reps, and the more reps you're getting, the more you're seeing. It's just, you're going to be more comfortable, especially when they throw something new at you. You're going to be more relaxed and more able to just like, oh, I'm just used to being in this place where I'm uncomfortable and I'm having to kind of learn and I'm having to kind of like sort of relate it to something I already know about. So that's why I think it works, but just one person's opinion.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. Like a lot of times what I'm looking for is not necessarily like that you is kind of how you think about problems as well. So that's why I think it's important to not just do like the coding as part of a course, right? Because the course is like, okay, here, do this and do that, but you're not really getting into the why, and kind of solving a problem that's kind of being laid out for you. And it's good to like learn, you need to learn a language, right? You need to learn the syntax and stuff like that, but you need to be able to apply it to a project or a problem and explain kind of what was your process, why did you do this, why did you do that, and that kind of problem thinking is very important as well.
Any other questions? These are great questions.
So to kind of follow up the topic on like projects, so from what I've heard, it's predominantly like focused on your ability to kind of like explain why you use the stack, as well as kind of go through your thought process about certain cases about a project, as opposed to like how extensive the project is. Is that where like the micro projects?
I would agree. I think it's also like, don't forget the keyword. Like, I don't say practice projects, I say passion, because the thing that you want to sell to someone is you have more upside than the next person that walks in the door as a junior engineer. It's not your current skill that's like they're investing in you in 2 years. Are you going to be further along the path in a couple of years if I hire you versus I hire somebody else? So you got to sell the sizzle of like, here's why I chose to solve this problem. And here's how I thought about solving the problem. Here's why I picked the technology I picked. Show that you put that level of thought into it. But the first thing is, in my mind, when I'm evaluating a candidate, I have this word I call coder, right? And senior engineers know what I'm talking about when I say, you can tell when someone walks in the room who's a coder and who's like a paycheck player, right? Or like they can write software, but like they're going to clock in at 9 and they're going to leave at 5 and they're going to turn their brain off when they leave the office. But then there's developers that, you know, in their first year as a software engineer, they're going to be like a senior principal in like 5 to 10 years. Like you can just tell, just when you talk to them, the passion that comes across matched with just the right amount of like foundational skill. You're like, okay, they've gotten to this point, pretty solid in the foundations, and they got a ton of passion. I will invest a ton of my time and effort leveling this person up. So that's what you have to sell. You have to convince them that like it's better to invest in you than invest in the next person that walks in. Because as a junior engineer, they're not investing in you to come in and make a difference, be a difference maker, right? They're coming in knowing they're going to have to do some work and they're going to have to invest in you in order for you to get better over time. Is that
Thank you.
helpful?
Oh yeah.
Any other questions?
No, I'll just kind of add to what Andrew said about showing creative solutions to problems. I'd say the positive feedback I usually get is, oh, wow, a lot of work went into that, or wow, that was a really good approach. And you know, the good approach is working hard to show that you can work hard. That's very important, but the good approach goes a long way.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not your first. Sometimes you got to refactor it. So that's okay too. Any other questions? All right, I'm about to go eat a carnitas chimichanga. Don't want to make you jealous, but
Man.
cool. If there's no other questions, I'll do a short plug. We are always looking for principal engineers. So the instructors that work at our program usually have to be, you know, craftsmen or craftswomen. And so if you know anybody that is sort of like tired of the rat race, then feel free to point them our direction. We're always looking for super senior tenured folks. We're also looking for mentors. So if there's anybody that as a more tenured seasoned person wants to give back and wants to help the next generation of folks on the phone right now that are earlier in their career, we'll be happy to have you mentor apprentices. We do not yet have our data engineering apprentice cohort starting, but it should be starting in the first quarter. So I know that gets everybody kind of excited. There's opportunity to potentially earn and learn. So yeah, feel free to reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email, mike@sdcs.io. More than happy to answer questions. I do a looking for work session every Tuesday. So if you have more questions, feel free to ping me. I think Twitch is a thing now, so you can find it on the Twitch channel. But yeah, super excited.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Thank you all. A question, Mike, about this mentor program, let's say, how that works.
So if you are a mentor interested in giving back, the time commitment is 1 hour per month. And so if you go to our website, it's sdcs.io/mentor. There's a page where you can sign up, and then we'll basically give you access to like training materials so that you can kind of do a good job of helping people to level up. So we have some guidance, and then we just we match up apprentices and junior engineers with mentors, and then you spend 1 hour a month committed to, you know, helping them get better.
Got it. Yeah, I'm interested in that. So
Awesome.
good.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you, Mike. Appreciate you taking the time to share with us and answer our, you know, data engineering specific viewpoint on things. So yeah, we'll keep
sure.
an eye on everything else you're sharing out there, and appreciate you taking the time with us tonight.
Awesome. Thanks.